Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, episode 24.
Bitcoins are trading at $630 per Bitcoin. That's 63 cents per millibit. But more importantly, there's a new coin on the block, and it's called LTB coin. That's right, let's talk Bitcoin coin. And you may want to know, what is LTB coin trading at? Well, we don't have an answer for you yet, but we hope to down the road. So we're going to do our best to track the progress of LTB coin and keep you guys in the loop. We're very excited about this new currency and this new opportunity for both content creators and listeners. So stay tuned for more about LTB coin from Bitcoins and Gravy.
Now that's gravy. Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, and thanks for joining us today as we podcast from East Nashville, Tennessee. I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lid Shaw.
We're two Bitcoin enthusiasts who love to talk about Bitcoins.
And share what we learn with you, the listener. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for listening to Bitcoins and Gravy.
On today's show, Lidge and I traveled to Cleveland Heights, Ohio, where we meet with Nikhil Chand and Adam Fleischer. Nikhil Chand is a self-proclaimed higher education technology professional who founded a Cleveland Bitcoin consultancy called Coin Neo, and who is also the founder of the Bitcoin Boulevard US on Lee Road.
And for the second half of today's show, we were having such a good time talking to both Nikhil and Adam, we decided to just keep the tape rolling. We wanted to give you guys a little insight into what goes on behind the scenes here at Bitcoins and Gravy, and just keep talking to those guys because there was so much cool stuff going on with the Bitcoin Boulevard. Roll it, Johnny. We're very pleased to have with us today Nikhil Chand of the Bitcoin Boulevard in Cleveland, joining us from atop a keg of beer.
Nikhil, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. So Nikhil Chand is a self-proclaimed higher education technology professional who founded a Cleveland Bitcoin consultancy called Coin Neo, and, as Lidge just mentioned, is also the founder of the Bitcoin Boulevard US on Lee Street. Is that right, in downtown Cleveland, Ohio?
It's actually Lee Road in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, which is about 10 or 15 minutes just due east of downtown.
Okay, nice.
Okay, cool. The heights of Bitcoin. And I feel like I should clarify that Nikhil is sitting on top of a keg of beer so that he can be close to the microphone and bring a wonderful sound quality to all of you, our listeners. So thank you, Nikhil, for doing that.
You're welcome.
Nice. Above and beyond the call of duty, certainly.
Well, hopefully we'll drink this at the wine spot later. So.
Oh, cool. Tell us about the Bitcoin Boulevard. We want to know about this. It's very exciting to us.
Yeah, how'd you get started with the Bitcoin Boulevard?
Sure. Well, actually, the wine spot really is the flagship business that started this all. I'm actually sitting with Adam Fleischer here, the owner of the wine spot. This is my local community. I live in the community about a block away from Bitcoin Boulevard. And when I came up with the idea, I thought I'd like to start this in my own community. I was looking for partners, basically, and sent my message out to various businesses on this road, people that I know as customers, people I know personally, people I know just in the neighborhood that are local proprietors, and also reached out to some local city government folks, one of who was at the time running for a seat in the local city council. And he helped me really validate my idea that it would be a good idea for the community. And we talked about who may be good businesses to approach about accepting Bitcoin just in general. The wine spot really, and Adam really was a forerunner of both of our ideas. So we met with Adam, and this is back in December probably, to just talk to him about Bitcoin, to see what his thoughts were about this, and maybe just present the idea of at least getting one store up and running with Bitcoin, because we thought, well, yes, there are some business incentives here to accepting Bitcoin, the incentive to lower your fees in electronic transactions. But I also thought that there was a time opportunity for lots of brand awareness and press awareness for doing something very innovative in our community. So we brought this idea to Adam, and he took his time to research it himself, which is what we wanted. And after the new year, he said, let's do it. So in February, we launched with the wine spot, and Adam is very connected with the local small business community on our street. And I think people kind of watched to see what his experience was, and it was nothing but extremely positive. We had very positive reaction from our local press. Soon we were picked up in some larger networks, and this was all really great brand awareness for Bitcoin. It was great brand awareness for the wine spot. It was great brand awareness for myself, and it really started a discussion about what this new technology was in our local community, which is part of our goal for Bitcoin Boulevard, was to have a place to help demystify this whole concept and have a locale where locals and people who are maybe not familiar with Bitcoin to come and experience it and look at it and learn why it is making the headlines over the past couple of years.
Okay, great. Well, if you don't mind, let me jump in just here for a second and ask you, what were some of the ways that you were able to demystify it for new business owners and people who were learning about it for the first time?
Well, I think, I had to have my tools in order, and the biggest tool was really BitPay and Coinbase. Looking at their merchant tools, we ended up choosing BitPay because they really are very simple for merchants. It's easy sign up. The POS tools that they give you to check out customers is very easy. The interfaces are not unfamiliar to anybody who's used things like Square or any other electronic POS system before. So from the merchant standpoint, it really was for me making sure that the tools were safe and secure and that they were easy, especially for non-technologists. Adam happens to be a technologist. His former career was as a software consultant in the healthcare industry. That also kind of helped formulate our logistics for other businesses that we plan to get on board. And really, it was very easy for all the merchants to look at BitPay's tools and put them on their iPads and start checking out people. So the US dollar settlement worked for everybody very well. Their checking accounts, the money was in there. And when they saw the 1% fee, they thought, well, this is a piece of cake. The biggest drawback we've had is the larger the proprietor's business, the more difficult it gets to, logistics-wise, to ring out customers, especially with a large staff, because none of this is integrated natively with POS systems. So there is a small step of grand totaling things in your main POS system and then exiting out of that to check out people in the BitPay checkout page and then going ahead and issuing receipts or what have you through the main POS system to try to maintain a central accounting ledger. But I feel that in time, this is very new, that these payment processes will become more and more integrated with the major POS systems. Like we're using Lightspeed here at the Wine Spot, so are other merchants on Lee Road, and Micros is a big one for restaurants. And I think that if we want to continue and get larger and larger businesses, we're going to have to see much more integration natively with a lot of these POS systems.
I have to interject that you must be doing an excellent job, because there was a woman in the video for the local news channel that referred to you as making Bitcoin so easy to use.
Well, yeah. And really, again, part of that and a part of my company Coinio, my vision was I couldn't just go and cold call businesses and say, hey, do you accept Bitcoin, and not have any tools available for them. So, before I did any approaching of any businesses, I created Coinio, and I blogged about Bitcoin. I blogged about Bitcoin-related information for businesses, real kind of entry-level stuff and things that I thought would really be approachable to what merchants may ask me. So I had an entity that I could not only go to these businesses, but also show them, hey, you don't have to take it from me. I'm really not trying to sell any snake oil here. I really believe in this new payment network, especially as competition to traditional banking systems. But here's my blog. It has links to bitcoin.org and all the basic Bitcoin resources. And I have blog posts that pertain to, merchant-related topics. So that was all part of it. And I think having that package to present the merchants really limited the time they had to spend digging it around for themselves. And I think it was created some value for them.
We really want to start our own Bitcoin Boulevard here in Nashville. What you're saying is, hey, get your ammunition together before you go in and talk with them. Not just talking points, but tools that you can point them towards, such as your site, Coinio.
Yeah, COINNEO. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about Coinio. So Coinio is more than a blog. Coinio is some interface that allows merchants to better understand Bitcoin, to think about accepting it. And does that also introduce them to BitPay or to processing?
That's exactly right. I mean, it really is, Coinio is Coin Northeast Ohio is what it's kind of short for. I really am targeting organizations and businesses of all sizes throughout Northeast Ohio and beyond who are interested in learning more about this technology they're hearing about, and also present them the tools to show, hey, you know what, you can utilize this technology without being a technologist. You have credit card vendors that come in here and sell you credit card machines, and they take their percentage, and you don't really have to think about the architecture in the background. Well, there's all sorts of development in the Bitcoin world that make those types of approaches possible as well for merchants, where they can take advantage of Bitcoin technology without having to be necessarily technologists. That's another part of this. I wanted to approach this, if I'm going to approach businesses, not from a technology standpoint. This really is a business initiative. I had to look at it from a business perspective. I assumed from the bat that the people I'm going to be talking to about this have either never heard of Bitcoin or maybe have heard some of the negative press about Bitcoin or something. And I also knew that these businesses would not have the time of day to really invest in something that really they didn't see the value in because they're very busy. So I really had to have my tools in order to help them understand that this is a tool that shows a lot of promise in the future for revenues and helping you meet your margins, but also has a lot of power in the present day for brand awareness and doing something new and exciting that gives your business and our business community a competitive edge, not only locally, but around the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. So I don't know if you could do this right here on the show, but could you use an example? So let's say, for an example, I'm a coffee shop here in Nashville. Can you explain to me how this works, why it's so simple, and sell me on accepting Bitcoin? I'd like to accept Bitcoin this afternoon.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What Lidge just said, I would love to have a little quick tutorial from you that we can take away with us and that our listeners can take away. So when they're going around to businesses, they're not just asking off the cuff, hey, do you guys want to accept Bitcoin? They're being very specific, just like you were, and maybe even using Coin Neo. Is it something that we can use and that our listeners can use if they want to start a Bitcoin Boulevard in their town?
Oh, certainly. And I think for merchants, the thing that always starts the ears ringing is the 1% or less fees. Here you have a technology that competes with the credit card industry where you can accept electronic payment for 1% or less and have that money in US dollars. I think the easiest thing today to do is go to bitpay.com and click the Accept Bitcoin button. You're set up within a matter of minutes, and you can start accepting Bitcoin right away, and all the tools are free. And they charge a 1% transaction fee for converting that money to your local currency. So for a local coffee shop, for instance, what I would do is present BitPay as an option for their tool, which is comparable to their credit card merchant gateway, an alternative to their credit card merchant gateway, and set them up with BitPay and then have them convert their Bitcoin income to dollars and then show them how to ring out a customer, for instance. So let's say a coffee shop is using Square. You would ring up your coffee in Square in dollars. You'd bring up the grand total, present the customer with the grand total in their local currency in dollars, and then you would just launch the BitPay website and put that total in there and show the customer the QR code, and they would pay with their Bitcoin instead of with a credit card or with cash. And the merchant would pay far less in credit card fees.
Okay, so now hold on. I'm a coffee shop, and I've heard about this Bitcoin thing, but I've heard that it's really dangerous. It's really volatile. Aren't I going to lose all my money somehow?
Yeah, so with a payment processor like BitPay or Coinbase, they guarantee that you will not lose any money to the volatility of Bitcoin. So if you choose, that is, to convert that money to US dollars right away. So you have the option, if you present a product for $100 to the customer, you're presenting it as $100, and they pay $100 at the current exchange rate. I think it's called the BitPay Best Bid Rate, which is a aggregate index they use for their pricing, for their exchange pricing. The business gets $100 minus the 1% fee put into their checking account within 1 or 2 days, no matter what happens to Bitcoin's price. So Bitcoin's price could tank within that same hour, and BitPay is going to guarantee that you're going to get the money in your checking account at the price that the customer paid for it at the time of sale.
Right. So what are some of the first things that you heard from merchants when they shut you down and they said, I'm not interested? Maybe you went back a day or a week later and asked them again, and they said, no, I'm still not interested. What were the biggest reasons? What were the biggest fears that merchants had to accepting Bitcoin?
I think the first thing I got was a lot of silence. There was really no response to any of this. Adam was really the first one to really respond. And then beyond that, it's always pretty much the classic, isn't this used for drugs? Isn't this used for Silk Road? Isn't this a Ponzi scheme? That's basically the de facto questions we received at the beginning. One of the goals I had for this project was to take those stigmas out of the equation moving forward. And so once people actually saw this work at the Wine Spot, once they saw that the Wine Spot was not losing their their business, or whatever, and they were secure in their assets, then they opened themselves up to the greater conversation. And we had a meeting. We talked about all these talking points and why they either were not valid or didn't apply in this scenario.
Are you there right now with Adam?
I am.
And I'm chomping at the bit to say some things.
Yeah, maybe we should talk to Adam and let's hear straight from the horse's mouth, like when he first came to you.
Let me move my keg.
Oh, wow. I love that keg sound.
How's that? Is that okay?
I used to be a bartender. I miss that keg sound, man.
That's great.
There you go.
So, yeah, when Nikhil first came to you, Adam, what did you think? What was your first response?
Well, just as Nikki mentioned, I do have a technology background, so I was at least open to the conversation. Nikki's a neighbor, so I felt comfortable sitting down with him. I mean, something that you have to keep in mind is when you're a retailer, and if you've got any retailers or business people that are going to listen in on this, they will probably smile when I say that we get approached on certain days with 5 to 10, great ideas. And that's all, people walk in while you're trying to run your business with these great ideas. And many times you just don't have the capacity to take it in. But having a technology background, having somebody in the community that I knew walk in with a friend who was a potential council person was made sense to me to sit down and at least have the conversation. With the background in technology, I sort of took a step back and I said, this sounds interesting. I'd heard of Bitcoin, but that was about it. So we had the talk, and then it was a matter of going back and doing the research.
Okay, question for you, Adam. Did you find that accepting Bitcoin had value to you as a business beyond sort of stroking your tech ego? And I say that in a respectful way, but I think that many of us have a tendency to be excited by the tech. And I'm just wondering, how much did it go beyond you being interested in the technical aspect of it?
Well, that is a great question. That's why I was chomping at the bit to get on the mic. The technology is great. The concept of the currency is great, but you're talking to people that are running a business.
Yeah, the bottom line is make some money.
Well, yeah, so this is really what I was thinking about when we had the conversation. I wake up every morning and I go to bed every night thinking about ways to differentiate my business. I think about ways to be more competitive. And ultimately, all of that has to be about increasing revenue. So when I look at potential opportunities from a business perspective, you can lay out whatever you want, but does it address those 3 things? And then if I say yes, there's an opportunity to use this quote unquote tool to do those things, then I look at what's the potential risk? How do I mitigate that risk, right? And what are the tools to make it easy to utilize? Will it disrupt my business? And if so, how do I minimize that disruption or use it in a way that increases our efficiency? So from a business person's perspective, if you've got listeners out there that are either merchants or want to go talk to the merchants, that's really the conversation you have to have. And then, I started to imagine if we could do this in a way that addressed those issues, the potential upside, the brand awareness, the press, exposure in the community. What did all of that mean? And after we talked about all that and I thought about it, I got really excited because this in particular, in so many ways, addresses all those things. And Nikki did a great job of coming to me with, a set of tools, the things that he talked about, a project plan, his ability to talk about how we integrate this new technology in with our current technology and our workflow for me to make it sort of a no-brainer, if you will, to go down this path.
Yeah, I love that you listed a list of actions as far as questions that need to be answered. Can you sum that up really quickly one more time, just those points that you listed?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Well, again, you're talking to a business person. So when we had the conversation about, this thing, quote unquote, Bitcoin technology, I was thinking about it from the perspective of, will it help me differentiate my business in a highly competitive market? Will it help me increase my competitiveness? Will I be able to compete at a different level with my business? And ultimately, will it help me increase my revenue, right? That's kind of the basic criteria that you want to think about when you approach a merchant.
That's great.
And then, how do you reduce my exposure, my risk in doing it? And then how easy is it to utilize?
Okay, so let me ask both of you guys, does it seem that people are heading to Lee Road? It is Lee Road, right?
It is Lee Road in Cleveland Heights.
To use Bitcoin? Are people headed that way using Bitcoin? Are they coming in from out of town? Are people in town in the Cleveland area using Bitcoin on the Bitcoin Boulevard?
Definitely. Now, it's all relative. You can't expect a mad rush of people using Bitcoin day one. It's sort of we imagine this as a hockey stick. And we probably don't want a mass onslaught of Bitcoin users because, as Nikki said, from a workflow perspective, it's not fully matured.
Hey, I just want to say, of course, you guys imagine it as a hockey stick up there in Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sitting on a keg of beer, no less.
Exactly. I think about hockey a lot. This has all kind of become this huge kind of community initiative, which is really kind of neat. So I think the answer to the question is that it's brought people to our community from within the community to talk about it, to see it, to understand it, but also clearly bringing people in from a radius of probably 100 miles or more, actually more, I know for a fact, to come in and talk about it and use it. Now, we've had some issues with the liquor license in the state of Ohio, which Nikki will talk about. So at this point, I cannot accept Bitcoin for alcohol. So it's reduced our risk to use it. But to go back to the community, when we first started talking about this, and I asked my customers when I was thinking about taking Bitcoin, what they knew about it and what their take was on it, if I asked 100 people, 99 people out of 100 had never even heard of it. And I can tell you today, just a few months later, I'm willing to bet that the clear majority in this community of 50,000 people can talk about and have a conversation about Bitcoin today, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure. They might know about it. Even if they still have the typical negative questions going in, they're going to know about it already, which is huge.
Yeah, yeah. It's in every age bracket, from the kids in the schools knowing about Bitcoin now to people in their 80s walking in and wanting to understand about it. And that's been a really neat part of it. And yeah, people are coming into our business, whether or not they have Bitcoin, because they're here, they're going to spend money. So it's a nice byproduct.
I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lid Shaw.
We're two guys from East Nashville, Tennessee who love talking about Bitcoin. Join us for Bitcoins and Gravy right here as we talk with business owners around the country and around the world who are using Bitcoins right now to grow their businesses.
We interview Bitcoin experts about cutting-edge developments, the future of Bitcoin the currency, and Bitcoin the shared network. We also talk with everyday folks who use Bitcoins instead of money for everyday purchases.
And if you're still not sure about Bitcoins, we can help. Bitcoins and Gravy will get you up to speed with this new fast-paced technology, Bitcoin. We invite you, the listener, to call us on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline at 615-208-5198 with your questions or comments about Bitcoin.
And remember to tune in right here for Bitcoins and Gravy.
Now that's gravy.
So, John, it's time once again for our Aw Heck segment. Hotline emails and comments, kids. We got an email in from one of our fans and listeners and guests. It's titled, People Are Listening. Would you like to read that one for us?
Oh, sure. It's from Cheryl Carr. Cheryl and Billy Carr, we interviewed, last week?
Yeah, we had him on a couple of shows recently on episodes 22 and 23.
I think that's right, for Satoshi Farms and also for Quid
Pro Quo, point of sale smart vendor.
Yeah, nice, man. That was pretty good, Lidge. Hey, so Cheryl says, I've gotten a few reach outs from random people who have heard the show and contacted me through Satoshi Farms website. I can see from our traffic we had 139 new visits on Monday and Tuesday of this week. Super cool. Thanks, guys.
Right on. Well, we love to hear that stuff. If we're having some positive effect on somebody else's life, that's a good thing, right? Be excellent to one another.
Absolutely. Be excellent to one another. Nice, man.
All right, cool.
Good stuff. Thanks, Cheryl. So, Lidge, we also have another howdy email that came in from Rasa. You want to read this one?
Yeah, well, Rasa writes in to tell us about paper wallets. He says, hi, guys. At least a few of us at Mycelium are big fans of your show. Well, thank you, Rasa. On episode number 21, you had an interview with someone who was going through the process of creating paper wallets. Well, that, of course, would be Mr. James Brown.
Oh, that's right. James Brown. That was fun.
I just wanted to let you know that Mycelium had an interview with Captain Kirk at the Bitcoin Beltway Conference. That's right, Captain Kirk, our man on the ground.
Our very own Captain Kirk.
And where we were demonstrating our newest device, the Mycelium Entropy. When it comes out, it will make printing paper wallets as easy as 1, stick a USB drive into your printer, 2, hit print. Wow. We just launched an Indiegogo campaign, and you can read more about it at indiegogo.com/projects/mycelium entropy. So yeah, I'm sure our fans can find it in the show notes. We'll put a link there. That sounds great. I love the concept of it. Imagine that, a USB stick straight into a printer, and then you don't even need the computer.
I love it, man. And Rasa says, keep up the great show. Hey, thanks, Rasa, and keep up all the great work with that fancy Bitcoin paper wallet. And keep up the great work with that Bitcoin paper wallet, man. I want one of those USB sticks.
That sounds pretty cool. Well, thanks for writing in. And again, to our listeners, please join us here on either the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline.
I wonder why more people aren't calling us on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline. We've gotten a few calls, and it's so fun to hear people's voices and then to put their voice on the show. Why aren't more people calling us on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline? I don't understand this.
You know, John, it could be that people would like a reminder of the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline phone number, which is 615-208-5198. Again, that's 615-208-5198. And just for those of you who don't know, 615 is the Nashville area code. So you'll be calling in directly to East Nashville, Tennessee to join us here on Bitcoins and Gravy.
That's right. This is no 800 number. This is calling Nashville, Tennessee directly. So give us a call.
That's right. Leave us a message, and then that'll allow us to include you and your question on the show.
That's right. You can be part of our podcast.
Well, John, I think I hear the phone ringing right now.
Hey, y'all, this is Danger Dead Nettles. Now, I ain't got the internet at my house, on account of I'm afraid of the Wi-Fi's. But anyhow, I came up with this idea in the middle of the night, and I just had to call y'all, and that's the idea that we got a new acronym, Decentralized Autonomous Media Network, the Let's Talk Bitcoin Network. Decentralized Autonomous Media Network spells out damn. Okay, that's it. Just food for thought.
Well, damn indeed. Decentralized Autonomous Media Network. Now that's crypto. Okay, John, let's beam down to the surface with Captain Kirk Phillips and find out what our Bitcoin correspondent has for us today.
Nice. Here's our guy on the ground from Washington, D.C. for the Bitcoin Beltway Conference 2014. Here we go, Captain Kirk.
Beam it up.
Hello, it's Kirk Phillips here at Bitcoin in the Beltway, and I'm here in the hallway with Manny Eager, who is going to talk a little bit about the Global Bitcoin Alliance. And Manny, I know you're up to many, many interesting things in the Bitcoin space. Can you please talk a little bit about your background, what you're up to, and then the Global Bitcoin Alliance?
Yeah, sure, of course. And thanks for the opportunity to share and discuss further what's happening in the very exciting Bitcoin space. My background is that I've worked extensively in a corporate capacity, Barclays International in Africa, Vodafone, which we're all familiar with, the Safaricom Peso initiative, which is part of the Vodafone network in Africa. So I bring all that experience and background in terms of the corporate or institutional application of what ultimately is what Bitcoin promises, is to address legacy issues and bottlenecks around financial equilibrium and access to fair value and the distribution of value and making that sustainable for everybody. So anybody who wants to participate in the economic system of the future needs to gain access if we want to see a level playing field, if we want to address issues of poverty or access to ultimately financial instruments to be able to trade or protect your own value in terms of assets and to be able to trade, quite simply. What the Global Business Alliance is set out doing in its new reformulated mission statement is to promote the growth of Bitcoin communities worldwide by sharing knowledge and resources and by connecting local, regional and national organizations. And it's not to reinvent the wheel or to compete with what anyone else is doing, but to ensure and enable that where we do all have knowledge, either by way of our experience and background, or we're discovering new and smart ways to come up with success stories and to support initiatives on the ground to address what is going to be the next big challenge for Bitcoin beyond the technology side, is the merchant and user and ultimately consumer adoption of these very, very exciting platforms and alt currencies and cryptocurrency plays that we all hear about on a day-to-day basis. And as the regulatory and licensing and consumer protection and all those factors are addressed and clarified going forward, and in all the countries around the world, it will free up and make more frictionless all these efforts and initiatives to promote a more equitable access and platform to the world economic system.
And do you have an example of some of the local or the regional or national organizations that are part of the Global Bitcoin Alliance?
Sure, yes. I've been involved in launching the Bitcoin meetup in Johannesburg, South Africa, where I'm from originally. 5 years ago, I moved to Canada and has been quite involved in Ontario province and more recently in Vancouver, working with startups and entrepreneurs entrepreneurs who want to accelerate or scale their initiatives who started saying, we want to do this Bitcoin thing. And obviously the first question was, what is Bitcoin? And from 2 years ago, become quite involved and been applying a lot of the accelerated startup and lean startup business principles that I've been teaching and mentoring at Stanford University on the Technology Entrepreneurship online course with the Kaufman Foundation as a next instructor, and participating in the Startup Canada and Startup Weekend initiatives in the respective cities that I've mentioned. But the key lesson is that people shouldn't follow traditional lone wolf approach, and it's all fair to say that a lot of ideas start in garages and they need to scale from there to become successful. The next big challenge, of course, is to find the right teams and team members with the right skills to complement what is usually strong technical skills in the Bitcoin community, to make sure that their ideas and their business models become successful, can be implemented, can scale, and of course gets the merchant and consumer adoption that we're all looking for.
How do you see that these local nonprofit organizations that would be part of the Bitcoin Global Alliance, and how do you see that they would help with these challenges that you're talking about, where it's necessary for these teams to come together and not act as the lone wolf?
The key there is, and again, it depends on what the intentions and requirements are for these local communities to participate, but I think if we open and transparent in our process and invite everybody to come in and participate on an equal footing, we'll get something going through which people are prepared to share their knowledge, their success stories, and obviously there's going to be challenges where we can maybe put our heads together and see how we can either dissolve these problems if possible or learn from lessons elsewhere. As we're familiar, a lot of initiatives that started in a number of foreign countries, the attitude was, let's just get on with business and not discuss or negotiate with government or regulatory authorities at all. And I think we've seen in a number of instances, Russia, China, and elsewhere, there's an immediate knee-jerk reaction if people try and come and do things under the hood or don't want to disclose or are not open and transparent in terms of their intentions. And sometimes justifiably so, because obviously the banks and everybody else has to comply with Know Your Customer, consumer protection, insurance, and other very onerous regulation and license requirements that they have to fulfill. And for people to come and compete on an equal footing and not have to comply, obviously is going to become an issue. And I think we need to educate ourselves and our members and whoever wishes to participate that at the end of the day there are rules and regulations out there, and often for good reason, unless it's over manipulated by whatever central authority, which we should argue our case in those instances as well. But we need to ensure that our members comply, that they don't get into trouble, because at the end of the day we want to see the Bitcoin business thrive. And I think the ultimate goal there is to see that there's global adoption through the support of members and whoever approaches us, to ensure that the rails are cleared and that the path is smooth towards success and creating sustainable business models.
That's great. So it sounds like that the Global Bitcoin Alliance is really a global connector of these organizations, so that you don't have the wheel spinning and the wheel recreation that you talked about, as well as really creating a knowledge base of all these successes and the challenges and so forth. And it can be a centralized resource as well for these other organizations to draw from. Where can organizations that are out there, either existing, how can they contact the Global Bitcoin Alliance? And if there's a group that thought about forming and wish they could join something like this, like how does the group go about contacting the GBA?
Currently there's a website up through which people can obviously make inquiries, and as we expand on the various nodes around the world where people can make contact on their home turf, or they want to talk to whomever is available, we'll create that facility, and potentially through a blog or a knowledge-based site on the web through which people can do at least initial inquiries. The key is at the end of the day, and that's what we've learned in the startup community, if you can sit down with somebody face-to-face, a mentor or an advisor, or somebody that the community feels has the credentials to provide support, so be it. Again, I think we want to emphasize it's not yet another initiative in the space, but we see it as a collaborative network, a Creative Commons if you wish, that is agnostic to whoever has membership wherever, in whatever organization, because we see it as a team effort that's going to make all of this work. So right now our first point of call is probably our portal, our website. Start there and try and connect with the members either in your region or just keep pinging the website, and we'll see how quickly we can assist with the right information.
Wow, Manny, that was well said. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Bitcoin in the Beltway conference. And I look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you very much.
Kirk, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to chat to you. Cheers.
Okay. Kirk out.
And now we take you back to the Bitcoin Boulevard. Yeah. Well, that's frustrating that you're having some issues dealing with the liquor board as far as accepting Bitcoin. I imagine that Al Capone was probably selling his liquor on the Silk Road back in the day. But
Al and Meyer Lansky, don't forget about him. So you guys have some regulation issues there with selling alcohol for Bitcoin. Other than the regulations, well, if you could talk about the regulations, but also any other problems, any other enemies you've made along the way, any anti-Bitcoin people who are really frustrated with what's going on with you guys?
Well, let me say two things, then I'm going to turn it over to Nikki to talk about what's going on in the state. One is we were going through the process of, creating the infrastructure to start using Bitcoin. I went to our local Merchants Association board meeting. I'm on the board. And one of the things I wanted to let them know was that we were going to start taking Bitcoin. And there were probably 20 independent merchants in the room that looked at me like I was crazy. Not one person came up to me and said, hey, let me in on that. But I was able to go back to the next board meeting 3 months later, and we had been up and running for about 6 weeks. And we had, all these articles on us, all these news clippings, and I could stand there and say to them, listen, this process was super easy. We've gotten great press, great exposure. It works. People are spending money. Suddenly, those merchants were very interested in doing this. And thus, the concept was born of this Bitcoin Boulevard that Nikki had really envisioned and now was able to create. It was because it's proof of concept. So no, we don't have any enemies. People are fully behind it. The merchants are excited about it. And I do think it will grow. So the second part of that is when we were going through the process of going live with Bitcoin, we wanted to stay safe with all the regulations. Having a liquor license is our livelihood, so I didn't want to risk anything. So we set it up to where we didn't actually take the Bitcoin. We converted the Bitcoin through BitPay to US dollars. We got what we were charging. So we thought it was very much like accepting a credit card or even a check, if you will. When I called the state to run the process by them, nobody had heard of Bitcoin or this technology. And in fact, I tell the story that when I picked up the phone and called the Ohio State Liquor Board in Columbus and said, can I speak to somebody about Bitcoin technology? After getting transferred, 6 or 8 times, guess where I ended up? I ended up in the IT department talking to some analyst because I used the word technology. So, we were starting from scratch. I do believe that the state of Ohio has been open to the conversation, but this is so new. And we're talking about, a state agency. They don't make changes very quickly. It's part of it's just an educational process, and that's kind of where we sit right now.
Yeah, and I have to say, Adam, Nikhil has come on here as a presenter of Bitcoin and using it with merchants, but you jumped in, and you're a great speaker at this. Your presentation has been very flawless, so you're doing a great job up there.
Well, thank you. I am fully behind it. I'm very excited about it. I would tell any merchant anywhere that this is something that they have to at least look into. The important thing is if you're a technology person or you're a Bitcoin enthusiast, having the proof of concept, having a merchant that's been through it that can talk at the merchant's level will change the conversation.
Yeah, and people ask me all the time, how did you do the Bitcoin Boulevard? How did you, it's like I always say start hyper local, start with your relationships that you already have in your local community, because you're going to be presenting a topic that is, to somebody who doesn't understand Bitcoin, is often very controversial. So, do you have a shop owner that can be your champion? I found Adam, and he was really the champion, and he was, like he said, the proof of concept for the rest of the merchant community. So not only I kept it hyper local, but I found somebody who was also very connected with the other merchants on our street. So yes, they're competitors, but they also work together in a very friendly relationships to help our neighborhood in general. So that's really where I think it has to start, especially if you want to get your neighborhood up and running with Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit like a podcast. Start with your fan base, and the audience will build from there.
Start with your friends and family and people that you know. I like the idea of going into a business where you already know the owners and they already know you, and there's a certain trust that's been established just because you've been coming in and paying your money and they've been giving you a good product. Start there. That's probably the best advice that I've heard when it comes to getting merchants to accept Bitcoin.
Yeah, and so for our listeners who might like to start there, can they find you guys through CoinNeo? Do you have some of these outlines laid out there for them? How can they find you guys?
Certainly. Well, they can always go to CoinNeo to learn about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin BitcoinBoulevard.us is our project site where they can learn about the merchants and see our neighborhood, basically. And then I'm also working on, because I've had this question often, and it is kind of a loaded question. I don't want to seem like there wasn't a lot of work. There was a lot of work that came out of preparing and launching Bitcoin Boulevard US, not only from a technology perspective, but also from a social media strategies and all sorts of stuff. So I'm thinking about maybe writing a book or some kind of paper that can be released so people can really reference that and know all the kind of different idiosyncrasies we had to meet. Again, you ask about if we had any antagonism going into this. I think the two areas where we really saw some resistance, which I think are interesting, one from my own place of business where I work during my day job, which is Case Western Reserve University, which is a leading research university in the U.S. Often quoted in articles with me in the local press, they go to professors at Case Western to get their take on it, and it's always been pretty misinformed from an academic perspective.
Well, you have to not know much to be an expert,
Well, exactly. But, these are people that are banking professors, finance, technology professors, and their statements are just not factual, which I think is concerning. So I want to reach out to maybe clarify with them. I think there's a lot of opportunity. You see all these universities developing Bitcoin strategies. I think that should be no different for my own university. And the other area where I've seen some resistance, and by the way, the Bitcoin community has been fantastic in supporting us. However, I have had a lot of people say, why on earth would you have gone to the regulators? The classic, a lot of people from the Bitcoin community say, what did you expect going to the liquor board?
Sure.
Don't involve the regulators and stuff like that. But
ask forgiveness, not permission.
That is true. But if you ask any business who has a liquor license in Ohio about asking forgiveness after getting a citation,
not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
Anywhere, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that the detractors are not liquor store owners themselves, right?
Exactly. And so what you have to do, I think, if you really, be careful what you wish for, if you want to see mass Bitcoin adoption throughout our country or the world, you're going to have to find a healthy marriage with the regulatory bodies that, which these businesses conduct their businesses under. And really, that's what we're going for. Part of this is to raise awareness about Bitcoin. That's not only for Bitcoin novices in our community and general public, but that's also for regulators. We want to say, hey, if you're going to have discussions about Bitcoin at the state level or the federal level, come to us and make sure we can sit at the table with you, because we want to have those discussions with you.
Yeah, I like to think that regulators are doing that more and more. They're talking to people who know about Bitcoin. They're talking to local businesses and getting advice from them. And I think that's, from a regulatory perspective, I think that's the way to go. Now, you guys are only the second Bitcoin Boulevard in the world, isn't that right? Where's the other one? In the Netherlands or someplace?
In the Netherlands, and they've been a huge help and big supporters of us. We reached out to them in the beginning, just on the spirit of global camaraderie.
Yeah, well, we're glad you guys could bring the Bitcoin Boulevard to the people and out of the nether regions.
That's our goal.
Man, we would love to come and visit you guys on the Bitcoin Boulevard sometime in Cleveland. I think, Lidge, we should plan to do a show where we do the show live from the Bitcoin Boulevard in Cleveland.
Can I get a hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Can I get a crypto?
Crypto. That is totally crypto, man.
I will get you your own kegs to sit on while you're here.
I want to sign off also by telling you guys that, in my opinion, what you guys are doing is potentially the most exciting thing in Bitcoin from where we are. I mean, other than some of the philanthropic efforts that we get excited about too. But we are really, we like to be focused on public adoption and making it part of the daily use and merchants and community. And you guys are actually doing that. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on in Bitcoin, all of which is exciting, much of which is very tech. But actually using it the way you guys are and getting people to just being able to walk down a street and use it. It's cool stuff.
Yeah, it really is. Lidge and I are not tech guys. So, if someone said, hey, do you want to go sit around and talk about some tech stuff tonight? Or do you want to go to a good restaurant or go get, go to a bar and get a good pint of beer? We're going to go to the bar and get the good pint of beer.
Yes, indeed.
Well, you got that right. And this has provided, almost a dozen new places to host our Cleveland Bitcoin meetup. So a lot of just Bitcoiners just love coming here. And so it's been really a fascinating and exciting endeavor for our neighborhood.
Okay, one quick question. As you get a new business to adopt Bitcoin and then you host a meetup there, have you started coming up with some kind of figures or numbers that get exciting to a business owner?
I will say this, that as this evolves, we clearly want some hard numbers, to throw down on the table. But it's very easy for me as a merchant to say, listen, I had a Bitcoin meetup on a Wednesday night, and I had 40 people come in from 50 miles away to sit and talk about this. And oh, by the way, they had drinks and they ate. You don't need much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, man. I love that.
Yeah. So thanks for the feedback. From my perspective, I'm really excited about it. I would love to see it continue to expand. I think it will. Just how quickly it does, I think it's just based on how much energy we put into it, and so I personally would be happy to help anybody that's interested in doing this.
Maybe you can give them a Twitter handle or something where they can reach you.
So my name is Adam Fleischer. I'm with the Wine Spot in Cleveland Heights. If anybody is interested in talking with me about the use of Bitcoin or Bitcoin Boulevard, I'd be happy to speak with them. We can be found online at thewinespotonline.com. We're on Twitter at thewinespoch, and we're also on Facebook as the Wine Spot in Cleveland Heights. So give us a shout. We'd love to talk.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing that. I know our listeners will appreciate your help.
Absolutely. And guys, before we go, can you tell us how many other businesses are there on the Bitcoin Boulevard in Cleveland Heights?
Well, we have 7 businesses that actively accept Bitcoin. We have several other bars that have decided not to because of this legal situation that we're still considering part of the Boulevard because they are a big part of the conversation, which is the spirit of our Boulevard. And we have a few other service providers. We have a local software developer who's helping us with some POS integrations for web. And we have a PC repair guy that travels around Cleveland that is located here in Cleveland Heights as well. So not just brick and mortar, we also have some other service businesses as well, along with a construction company.
And have you found any other apps that would help a traveler, for example, locate all these businesses out there?
I really like Airbits. That's the one I've been really gravitating towards lately. It's very sleek. We're on their app. It's a very sleek directory. I find CoinMap to be just very... it needs some updating.
A little clunky, yeah.
Coin Traveler also.
Yeah, I used Coin Traveler recently in Brooklyn and found all kinds of pinpoints and stuff. Unfortunately, when I got to the restaurant, it wasn't there.
Oh, yeah. Well, usually what happens with me is I find a restaurant and none of the staff knows the heck I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the things we wanted to avoid for our Boulevard. We didn't want that user experience to happen here. So all the employees are fully trained and everybody knows what's going on.
Guys, one last thing before we go. As far as the regulations, you cannot sell alcohol in Ohio for Bitcoin. Is that right?
Correct. They consider it a barter because they're going with the IRS guidelines that it's property. And in Ohio, you can't barter for alcohol. So no books for beers here.
I see.
And so what they didn't take into account is that we're using a third-party payment processor to convert this to dollars. So really, the businesses are accepting dollars from the payment processor, no different than accepting a foreign credit card from an international traveler.
Right. Good point. So
Right.
the user or the customer is just simply using that app and that point of sale to convert their Bitcoin to US dollar, and then they're transacting with the liquor store in US dollars, which is totally legal.
Yeah. So how are you working that out, and how's that going to play out?
Well, I think the restaurants that ended up being on our Boulevard, accepting Bitcoin, the Tavern Company and the Cats Club, they simply just split out the alcohol bill with the food bill, which they're used to doing for other business clients anyway. And so you pay for your food, non-alcoholic items in Bitcoin, and you pay for your alcohol with a cash or credit card. And so now we move forward to try to at least get some cooperation with the state to allow Bitcoin sales, maybe an exemption for digital currencies, maybe an agreement that you have to convert to U.S. dollars and not retain Bitcoin, at least for now. Or maybe do we look at changing the whole old law so barter is not exempt from it? So we have to decide on how we're going to approach that.
It seems to me that it would just be a process of getting the legislators to understand that the transaction is between BitPay paying for the liquor in U.S. dollars and the seller of the liquor.
Precisely right. And I think what we need to do next is find somebody who is willing to be a champion for that. And really, considering the gravity we've received in the press for this and the innovative spirit of it and being a small business project, I think we're also going to be reaching out to our governor, Kasich, who I wonder if he heard about our stifling with this one particular department, if even somebody at that state level could be helpful to move this along. So right now we're trying to just do our homework and find out who the correct players are to include, which also includes individuals who are running for election in the upcoming elections who might want to take this on as a talking point.
Well, wonderful. I know there's a new platform for supporting political candidates through Bitcoin, so there might be an opportunity there. And then hopefully somebody up there is just listening to the show.
Exactly.
So.
I mean, we might move toward an era where instead of bribing politicians with U.S. dollars, we can bribe them with Bitcoin. Is that a bad idea? Lidge is shaking his head.
What's an era we don't have to bribe politicians?
No. Of course, I'm joking.
Imagine that world.
Oh yeah, of course I'm joking. We know that politicians are never bribed.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I don't get no respect. No respect at all.
Well, hey, so thanks so much for letting our listeners know how to find you guys and find out more about this on CoinNeo. I think this is going to be very helpful for us. We're looking forward to trying this out right here in Nashville.
It's been great talking to you guys. And, to all those professors out there worldwide who might be listening to the show, guys, hey, spend a little less time trying to get tenure and a little bit more time researching, especially when it comes to tech.
Especially if you're at Research University, yeah.
Yeah, nothing personal, guys and gals. Yeah, especially if it's a research university. Research. You're researching it. You're searching it, and then you're researching it. Searching it again.
All right, cool.
Exactly.
Well, hey, guys, thank you so much. We look forward to speaking with you again down the road and learning more about how the Bitcoin Boulevard has developed.
Yeah, we look forward to speaking with you again down the boulevard. I mean, down the road.
We look forward to being able to speak at all.
Well, come and help us with this keg of beer, and we'll see how that works out.
Hey, man, that sounds great. We're invited. Is that open-ended invitation?
Of course.
All right, great, guys. Well, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bitcoin Boulevard. See you guys.
All right.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks to our guests on today's show, Nikhil Chand and Adam Fleischer of the Bitcoin Boulevard in Cleveland, Ohio. And also, thanks to Manny Eager for joining us with Captain Kirk from Bitcoins in the Beltway. To find out more about our guests and sponsors, visit our show notes at bitcoinsandgravy.com/episode 24. Thank you so much for listening to our show. We greatly appreciate your time and attention. If you like the show, please remember to go to iTunes and leave us a review. Also, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to hear from Bitcoins and Gravy each week.
And remember the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline. Have you ever wanted to be a podcaster? Then call us at 615-208-5198 and leave us a message with your comments, questions, or complaints. This is your opportunity to tell us what you think. If you give us permission, we will put you on the show. So call the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline at 615-208-5198. That's right, that's the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline. And of course, we offer a number of ways for you to download all of our past podcasts. You can go to letstalkbitcoin.com or directly from iTunes, or you can go to our website, bitcoinsandgravy.com. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment and leave a review or comment on iTunes or SoundCloud. Let us know what you like or where we can improve.
And remember, it's your reviews and comments that help new listeners discover Bitcoins and Gravy, plus all the other great shows on the Let's Talk Bitcoin Podcast Network. And we thank you for your generous tips and donations.
I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lid Shaw, and you've been listening to
Bitcoins and Gravy from East Nashville, Tennessee.